Welcome, sleepy soul. I'll be your storyteller tonight, guiding you gently toward deep, peaceful rest. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more bedtime tales. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is, and if there's a story you'd like next, I'd love to hear it. I still have trouble saying the word bride out loud. My name is Sarah, I'm 28, and 3 months ago I got married in a glass-roofed countryside estate that my parents could barely afford. I should be arguing about honeymoon photos or planning a first anniversary, not replaying security footage frame by frame, trying to answer a question that makes my stomach turn. Which version of me actually said, I do? The day itself looked perfect on the surface. The venue was one of those restored manors outside the city. Rolling hills, trimmed hedges, the smell of wet earth and cut grass drifting in through every open window. Inside, everything smelled like hairspray, perfume, and roses that had been forced to bloom a little too early. I remember the weight of my dress most clearly. It was heavier than I expected, beating dragging down on my shoulders, the lace scraping lightly against my ribs each time I breathed. My mother fussed over the veil. My sister dabbed at my lipstick. Laughter bounced off the cream walls, thin and nervous. I kept catching myself in the full-length mirror, and every time I did, something small felt off. My reflection would blink just a fraction too late, or my mouth would still be smiling after my cheeks relaxed. Stupid, I told myself. Just nerves. Just the way the light hit the glass. But it was cold in that room. Too cold. Goosebumps prickled along my arms, even with 3 layers of fabric between me and the air. When I pressed my palm flat to the window, the glass felt almost warm compared to the room behind me. I should have taken that as a sign. There was a soft knock. 5 minutes, Sarah. The wedding planner called through the door. They're seated. We're starting the music. My heart slammed against my ribs. I could hear the faint strains of the string quartet below, muffled footsteps, chairs shifting. I smoothed my skirt with damp palms, trying to ignore the faint smell of something sour underneath the roses, like damp stone or soil that hadn't seen sunlight in years. You're shaking, my sister laughed, squeezing my hands. You're okay, okay? Just walk. Look at Daniel. That's it. I nodded, but when they left me alone for those last few seconds, the room felt suddenly hollow, like all the air had been pulled out. The floorboards felt slightly wrong under my heels, too soft, as if there was a space beneath them. I told myself to move, one step at a time. The corridor outside the bridal suite was long and narrow, lined with old portraits. My dress whispered across the carpet with every step. The lights along the wall flickered once as I passed, humming softly. The air smelled of dust trapped under old varnish. Halfway down, I heard my own footsteps behind me. I froze. The sound had that same soft drag of lace and satin, the same light click of heels. Echoes, I thought. Old building, long hall, of course it echoes. But my skin went tight, my mouth drying out. The footsteps behind me stopped when I did. Just nerves, I whispered to myself. My voice sounded too loud in the empty hall. At the end of the corridor, the double doors to the ceremony space stood closed, white wood with frosted glass panes. Through them, I could hear the music get louder, the muffled rustle of guests turning in their seats. My pulse pounded in my ears in time with the violin. The planner opened the doors a crack, peeking out. Then she turned to me, and for a second, her face drained of color. What? I asked. My throat felt tight. She swallowed. Nothing. I thought, never mind. Ready? She didn't sound ready. But she swung the doors open anyway. Warm light poured in. Sunlight filtered through the glass roof, colored slightly by the flower arrangements hanging from the rafters. The aisle stretched out between 2 neat rows of faces, white ribbons fluttering gently as people turned to look at me. I took a breath and stepped forward. The runner under my heels felt slightly gritty, like sand had been ground into it. Rose petals crunched faintly as my dress swept them aside. I kept my eyes on Daniel at the far end, standing beside the officiant, hands clasped in front of him. His tie was crooked. It's ridiculous what your brain holds onto in moments like that. He smiled when he saw me, Then his smile vanished, replaced with something I'd never seen on his face before. Pure confusion, then fear. His eyes shifted from me to somewhere just behind me. I heard the guests whispering before I dared to turn. Is that? How? What's going on? I turned my head slightly, just enough to see. There, halfway down the aisle behind me, was another bride. She wore my dress, my veil, my bouquet. Her posture matched mine exactly. The light caught the beading on her bodice in the same pattern. For one nauseating second, I thought there was a mirror at the back of the hall that I'd somehow forgotten. She lifted her head. It was my face, down to the small freckle near my left eye, the faint scar on my chin I got from falling off my bike at 12. But her eyes were black. Not dark brown, not shadowed black, like the pupil had swollen until it swallowed everything else. And her smile was wrong, stretched just a little too wide, as if someone had pulled invisible strings at the corners of her mouth. We locked eyes, couldn't breathe. The flowers in my hands suddenly smelled rotten, sweet and spoiled. The air felt thicker, heavier, like water. The string quartet faltered, notes slipping off key. She tilted her head at me like I was the one who didn't belong. Then she took one step forward. I felt the floor shift under my feet at the same time, as if we had both moved. Daniel whispered my name. I heard my mother gasp somewhere to my left. Then, without sound, without puff of smoke or flash of light, the other bride simply wasn't there anymore. 1 second, there. The next. Empty space, petals scattered on the runner as if nothing had disturbed them. Someone screamed. A chair scraped loudly across the floor. The officiant's papers fluttered from his hands. I stood frozen halfway down the aisle, my heart banging against my ribs like it wanted out. I think I'm going to faint, I heard myself say, but my voice sounded far away. The planner rushed to my side, her fingers icy on my arm. Keep walking, she whispered sharply in my ear. Don't look back. It's fine. It's fine. It wasn't fine. Somehow I made it to the end of the aisle. Daniel took my shaking hands in his. His palms were cold and damp. His eyes flicked over my shoulder again and again, as if expecting something to reappear. Did you see? I started. You came in twice, he whispered back, barely moving his lips. I thought I was losing my mind. I didn't, I said. I only, dearly beloved. The officiant cut in, voice trembling slightly. We are gathered here today. The ceremony played out in a blur. Words washed over me, vows, promises, forever. Every time I opened my mouth, I tasted metal, like I'd been biting my own tongue. My veil felt too tight around my throat. When Daniel said, I do, his voice cracked on the last word. When it was my turn, I hesitated. For a half second, I saw myself standing where he was, looking at a bride whose eyes were dark pits. My lips moved. I do, I said, hearing the words as if someone else was speaking through me. The room erupted into applause. The sound echoed strangely, like it was playing back a second later from somewhere deep underground. At the reception, everyone tried to pretend it hadn't happened. Oh, just a trick of the light. You know how phones mess with reflections. Probably someone's filter or something. But their eyes gave them away. People watched me too closely. My aunt pulled me aside and asked, You're feeling better now, right? You looked strange the first time. When I stared at her, she corrected herself. Before, coming down the aisle. The first time, I repeated. She laughed weakly. I'm just nervous. Ignore me. Later, one of the flower girls tugged at my skirt while I was talking to a cousin. Her fingers left sticky traces on the fabric. You changed your face, she said solemnly. I knelt down, forcing a smile. What do you mean, sweetheart? First you smiled normal, she said. Then you smiled with too many teeth. I felt the room tilt slightly around me. It was the venue manager who finally broke the polite denial. He approached us near the end of the night, his face pale, a sheen of sweat on his forehead. Mrs. Khan, he said, tripping over the new name. Could I speak to you and your husband? In the office, it's about the cameras. In the small security room, the air smelled of stale coffee and warm electronics. Monitors lined the wall, each showing different angles. Parking lot, kitchen, corridor, ceremony space. He queued up footage from the bridal corridor. There, he said, jabbing a shaking finger at the screen. Timestamp, 3:14 p.m. The ceremony was scheduled for 3:30. On the monitor, I emerged from the bridal suite, dress perfect, veil smoothed, bouquet held just so. I moved down the corridor with slow, careful steps. The lights above me glowed steady and warm. My shadow stretched neatly in front of me on the carpet. "Okay," I said. My voice sounded thin. "That's me." He swallowed. "Watch." He fast-forwarded. At 3:16 p.m., the same doors opened again. I came out a second time. Same dress, same veil, same bouquet. But the way I moved was different, stiffer, like my joints didn't quite fit right. My head tilted just a fraction too far to one side. The lights flickered as I passed under them, humming audibly through the speakers. My shadow was gone. Around the second version of me, there was no darkness on the floor, nothing cast by the overhead lamps. The corridor looked flatter, wrong, as if someone had forgotten to finish the image. The first me walked away from the camera toward the ceremony. The second me walked toward the camera, back to the bridal suite, our movements almost perfectly mirrored. They passed each other in the middle of the corridor without touching. For one frame, just one, their heads turned at the exact same time, and both faces stared directly into the camera. The second bride's eyes, even through the low resolution, were black pits. Then they continued on their paths, as if neither had seen the other. "I only walked it once," I whispered. My throat burned. "I remember every step." Daniel's fingers dug into my shoulder. "I watched you walk in twice," he said hoarsely. "Once pale, like you were about to faint, then again, smiling like you were enjoying some joke I wasn't in on." "I wasn't," I said. "I swear I wasn't." The manager scrubbed forward to the aisle camera. For a second, you could see two white figures at opposite ends of the runner, one just entering the hall, one standing near the altar. The groom looked between them, his face a portrait of horror. The image glitched. Lines tore across the screen. When it cleared, there was only one bride again. We didn't stay the night at the estate. We should have. It was part of the package. The bridal suite prepared with candles and champagne, rose petals scattered on the bed. But after seeing that footage, Daniel insisted we go home. "I just need to sleep in my own bed," he said. "Everything will make more sense in the morning." Didn't. That night, I woke up around 3:30 a.m. to the sound of fabric dragging across the floor. Our bedroom was dark, the only light a thin strip of street lamp orange leaking around the curtains. Daniel slept beside me, breathing slow and even. My mouth was dry, my heart already racing as if it had been running in my sleep. The dragging sound came again, soft, rhythmic, like the hem of a dress sweeping over wood. I sat up slowly, every muscle tight. The room was cold enough that my breath puffed out faintly in front of me. The smell of roses hit me, strong, cloying, and underneath it, that same sour dampness from the bridal suite. "Sarah," a voice whispered, sounded like mine. The curtains stirred though the window was closed. A shape shifted by the door, just darker than the surrounding dark. As my eyes adjusted, I saw pale fabric, the suggestion of a veil. The figure stepped closer. The air temperature dropped with each movement, sinking into my skin, into my bones. My teeth began to chatter. It stopped at the foot of the bed. Even in the dim light, I recognized my own face under the veil. Same freckle, same scar. But the eyes were empty, black, swallowing all light. The smile stretched too wide. "You walked my aisle?" she whispered, voice layered over mine, echoing faintly as if coming from a long hallway. "You stood in my place. You said my words." I couldn't move. My hands were fists in the sheets, knuckles screaming with tension. "I'm you," I managed to choke out. "There is no you and me. It's just me." She tilted her head. The veil shifted, revealing my own jawline, my own throat. "Do you know which of us cast a shadow when we said, 'I do'?" she asked softly. "Because they don't." She leaned forward, and the bed dipped as if something with real weight had pressed down on it. A cold hand brushed my cheek. Her fingers felt like ice pulled from deep water. "I'm just here to collect what's mine," she breathed. I must have blacked out. Or I tell myself I did, because the next thing I remember is sunlight streaming through the curtains and Daniel shaking me awake, asking why I was crying in my sleep. He said he hadn't heard anything. Later, when I watched the wedding video our guests had posted online, I noticed something the videographer hadn't. In the moment where the officiant asks me to repeat my vows, a shaft of light from the glass roof falls across Daniel's shoulder, casting his profile in sharp shadow on the floor. There is no shadow beside him, just a white dress, a still figure, an empty floor where darkness should be. So when people ask why I don't wear my ring, why we haven't moved into the house we bought together, I don't tell them about security footage or shadows or the sound of my own voice whispering in the dark. I just say, I'm not sure I'm the one who got married that day. At night, sometimes, I hear fabric dragging down the hallway outside my apartment. The sound always stops right outside my door. I never open it to check. I didn't think grief could follow you down a seating chart. My name is Amina. I got married in January, in a country club wrapped in frost and bad jazz covers. It's been 4 months, and I still can't bring myself to look at our wedding album without feeling like I'm inviting something in. The day itself was a kind of beautiful that hurts to remember. Outside, the world was all white and sharp edges. Ice clinging to bare branches, a thin crust of snow crisping under shoes in the parking lot. Every breath turned to mist. The cold chewed through fabric and settled in your bones. Inside, the heat was turned up too high. The air smelled like overworked radiators, perfume, and roast chicken. Candles flickered on every table, reflecting off glassware and making the whole room feel warmer than it really was. I was nervous for the usual reasons. Dress, makeup, whether anyone would trip, whether my uncle would get drunk and say something awful. And then there was the empty space in the middle of it all. Seat 14, table 3. That was hers. Lift long. My grandmother had been the anchor at every family gathering. Henna on her fingertips, jasmine oil in her hair, prayer beads always somewhere close. She had this way of making tiny rituals out of everything. Folding napkins, slicing fruit, telling stories that started as jokes and ended with quiet lessons. She died 11 months before the wedding. Heart failure, the doctor said. One moment she was telling my mother that my dress shouldn't show so much collarbone. The next she was gone, her tea still warm on the side table. I put her name on the seating chart anyway. Nanny, table 3, seat 14. Felt wrong not to, like leaving out a line in a prayer. People told me it was sweet, symbolic. I didn't tell them I kept imagining her walking in late, complaining about the traffic, scolding me for not saving her a proper chair. I didn't tell them I sometimes woke up at night, sure that I'd heard her cane tapping down the hallway. The ceremony room was set up near enormous windows, winter light flooding in cold and flat. The chairs were white, lined up in perfect rows. Somewhere behind the floral arch, my heart was beating hard enough to make me feel slightly drunk. I remember the texture of the aisle runner under my shoes. Thick, almost rubbery, that slight static cling when my dress brushed over it. The officiant's voice was a low, soothing hum. The guests were a blur of colors and breath and muffled coughing. When I reached the front, I made myself look around to soak it in. That's when I saw her. She sat halfway back, left side, 2 seats in from the aisle. An old woman, dressed in a dark blue shawl and a long coat that looked too thin for the weather. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap, fingers knotted with age. Her head was bowed slightly, face partially shadowed by a scarf, but I could see the curve of her jaw, the soft sag of her cheeks. I didn't recognize her. There are certain faces you know even when they age, even when illness changes them. This wasn't one of them. She didn't belong to any of the families present. Not my side, not Ferris's. She didn't have the chain of fake pearls his aunts favored, or the sharp-lined lipstick my aunts wore. Her skin was pale in a way that didn't match anyone I knew, her hair an indistinct gray under the scarf. But she was there, calm, still, hands folded. Sitting in a chair that I knew, without being able to say why, was seat 14, table 3's place for the ceremony. I blinked. The officiant asked who gave this woman to this man. My father squeezed my hand and said the line we'd practiced. My eyes flicked back to the old woman. She was looking up now. Her eyes were dark, but not in a dramatic horror movie way, just deeply set, shadowed by the overhead lights. Her mouth was relaxed, almost kind. There was no menace in her, no looming presence. If anything, she looked tired. I'll explain later, I thought, forcing myself to focus on the vows. She's probably someone's distant relative, or a neighbor, or I'd miscounted chairs and that wasn't seat 14 after all. That's how you talk yourself down from the first bit of weirdness. You stack logical explanations on top of it until the weight of them feels like truth. The ceremony went on. Rings, tears, laughter in the wrong places. Every time a camera flash popped, the room seemed to freeze for a heartbeat. People trapped mid-breath, mid-blink. Each time, when my eyes adjusted, I'd glance back. The old woman never moved. Fast forward to the reception. By then, the sun had set early, as it does in January, and the windows had turned into black mirrors. The fairy lights outside reflected back at us like constellations trapped in glass. The DJ had traded soft piano for slow, safe pop songs. My cheeks hurt from smiling. My feet ached inside shoes that seemed designed for sitting, not existing. Guests were seated at their tables, cutlery clinking, conversations ebbing and flowing. A low fog drifted in from the dry ice machine, catching the light and making everything look filtered. That's when I noticed her again. Table 3, seat 14. Same old woman. Same folded hands. Same calm, faint smile. Her coat was still buttoned, as if she hadn't taken it off despite the heat. No drink in front of her. No plate. Just a small, delicate handbag at her feet and a plain, white napkin folded on the table. My cousin Lena was leaning across the table, talking animatedly. At one point, her hand swept right through the space where the woman's shoulder should have been. I frowned. Maybe it was the angle. Maybe my brain was playing tricks. The light near their table flickered. A couple of candles sputtered, their flames stretching high for a second before settling. The old woman's face was briefly lit from below, and in that glow, for the length of a heartbeat, she looked almost like... No, I pushed the thought away. My chest had gone tight, my eyes stinging unexpectedly. Ferris noticed me staring. He leaned in, his breath warm on my ear, smelling faintly of mint and the whiskey his best man had forced on him. "You okay?" he asked. "Do you know her?" I whispered, not taking my eyes off the table. He followed my gaze, his forehead creased. "Know who?" There was a small pause that felt bigger than the room. "The woman in blue," I said slowly. "At table 3, seat 14, the one by the pillar. She's been sitting there since the ceremony." Ferris squinted. "Amina, table 3 only has, wait, that's your mom, your aunt, your cousins. That seat is empty. You insisted on leaving it that way. Remember?" I turned fully, heart thudding. From our vantage point on the dais, I should have been able to see her clearly. She was there, solid, present, looking right at me across the distance now, as if she'd been waiting to be properly acknowledged. Her eyes were a deep, storm cloud gray. Her expression didn't change, but something about her posture straightened, just a fraction. She lifted her hands from her lap, and the movement was so small, so careful, that none of the people at her table seemed to notice. She mouthed something, for maybe 5 syllables. I couldn't hear anything over the music, over the clatter and chatter, but my brain supplied a shape to the words anyway, an echo of a phrase I'd heard my grandmother say 1,000 times at other weddings. "Wait for the vows." A cold line traced my spine. "I'm going to talk to her," I said, and before Ferris could protest, I slipped down from the dais, the skirt of my dress swishing around my ankles. Up close, the air around her felt different. Not colder exactly, but heavier. The warmth from the heaters didn't seem to penetrate the space she occupied. The smell of food, roast meat, garlic, spices, seemed to dull as I approached, replaced by a faint whiff of something older. Talcum powder, jasmine, and the dryness of old paper. "Assalamu alaikum," I said, my voice coming out thinner than I wanted. "Are you comfortable? Can I get you something to eat or drink?" She turned her head slowly, as if turning too quickly might make something break. Up close, I could see the lines on her face, the fine network of wrinkles around her eyes like dried riverbeds. Her skin had that translucent quality some very old people get, where you feel you could almost see the veins underneath. Her eyes, though, were sharp, too sharp. "I'm just waiting for the vows," she said. Her voice was soft, worn at the edges, with an accent I couldn't quite place. Not from my grandmother's village, not from Ferris's side either. But there was something familiar about the cadence, a rhythm that tugged at something buried deep. "The vows are over," I said gently. "We're at the reception now. The ceremony already happened." She smiled. Her lips cracked slightly at the corners, like the skin there was too dry. "Not those vows," she murmured. "The real ones." Goosebumps rippled up my arms, prickling under the lace of my sleeves. "One of my cousins will bring you a plate," I managed. "Please enjoy yourself." She inclined her head. "You're a good girl," she said. "Like she was." "Like who?" I asked, but someone called my name from across the hall, and I glanced away for a second. When I looked back, the chair was empty. The coat, the handbag, the napkin, all gone. Only the indentation on the chair cushion remained, and even that smoothed out slowly, as if pressed by an invisible hand. I didn't sleep that night, but I managed to convince myself by morning that stress and exhaustion had skewed my perception. Weddings are emotional. Grief does strange things. Maybe table 3 had just been a cluster of moments I'd misread. It might have stayed that way, just a story I told myself not to dwell on, if not for the photos. Our photographer sent the first batch a week later, a curated collection of sneak peeks. I opened the email in bed, sunlight bleeding through the blinds in thin stripes, Ferris snoring softly beside me. The first shot was of us at the altar, the winter light making everything look crisp and fragile. The second was us walking back down the aisle through a shower of rose petals. The third was a wide shot of the guests seated, faces turned toward us, some blurred mid-clap. In the third one, table 3 was in the corner of the frame. There, in seat 14, sat the old woman in the blue shawl, hands folded neatly in her lap, eyes fixed not on us, but on something just above and behind us. I zoomed in. The pixels fuzzed, but her features stayed discernible. The more I looked, the more my stomach twisted. I closed the photo, opened another, our first dance, the buffet line, group photos with family, candids of guests laughing. In shot after shot, she was there, sometimes partially obscured, sometimes in full view, always in the same chair, the same posture, the same folded hands. No one was interacting with her, no one leaning in, no one passing her a plate. It was as if she'd been layered onto the images after the fact, a separate, unmoving element in a world full of motion. I called the photographer. "She's not one of ours," she said after I sent a few zoomed-in screenshots. I could hear her breathing quicken through the phone. "We log every face we don't know for releases. And no, I've never seen her before, in person or on film." "What about the video?" I asked. "Maybe she's clearer there." We didn't have the full video yet, but the videographer sent us a raw file of the ceremony when I explained. Curiosity, concern, something between those two emotions won out over his usual turnaround time talk. Ferris and I watched it together in the darkened living room, laptop balanced on the coffee table, the glow painting our faces with moving light. Outside, the January wind pressed against the windows, whistling faintly. The video quality was good, the kind that makes you see more than you did with your bare eyes. Every small twitch of expression, every flicker of candlelight seemed amplified. We watched myself come down the aisle. I looked more fragile on screen than I'd felt, my smile thin, my knuckles white around the bouquet. "There," I said, pausing as the camera panned the crowd. Table 3, seat 14. The old woman sat exactly where I remembered, hands folded, eyes steady. Someone 3 seats down laughed at a joke, head thrown back, while she remained completely still. We let it play, the vows, the readings, the moments where the sound of my own voice saying serious words made me want to hide. Now the kiss, the officiant said on screen. The camera cut to a close shot, but you could still see a slice of the crowd behind us. Right over my shoulder, just out of focus, was the old woman. As Ferris lifted my veil, her lips began to move. Not random twitching, not murmuring. Full words shaped carefully. She leaned forward, as if wanting to be closer to us. I turned up the volume until the speakers crackled. The room filled with the sound of rustling fabric, the faint whir of the camera's internal mechanisms, someone sniffing back tears. No voice, not hers, not any whisper that matched the movement of her mouth. On screen, Ferris kissed me. The room erupted in applause. Behind us, the old woman's lips formed a final word. I couldn't hear it, but on mute, I could read it. Soon, the image hiccuped, just a flicker, a split-second distortion where the pixels stretched and tore, and then she wasn't there anymore. The space behind us was empty, just a blur of faces and flowers. We rewound it again and again. Every time, the same thing. Mouth moving, no sound. That last word, clear enough to lip read. Soon, I thought of her answer in the reception hall. Not those vows, the real ones. That night, I didn't dream of her exactly. I dreamed of chairs. Rows and rows of chairs in an empty hall, each with a name card except one. The empty chair had no card, but I knew it was hers. Every time I tried to approach it, my feet sank into the floor, like I was wading through wet concrete. At 3 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of wood creaking, as if someone had just sat down at the foot of the bed. The room was dark, the radiator clicking softly as it cooled. My breath puffed in little white clouds I could barely see. In the dimness, I could make out the silhouette of the old rocking chair we'd put in the corner. An antique my grandmother had given me years ago. It was moving, just slightly, the wood complaining in tiny groans with each shift. There was no breeze. The window was closed. Ferris was dead asleep beside me, one arm flung over his face. The air carried a faint scent of jasmine and talcum powder. I watched the chair rock until it slowed, and then, just before it stilled completely, it jerked forward once more, as if someone had pushed off with invisible feet. Soon, a voice whispered, not out loud but inside my skull, like a memory I didn't own. I still don't know who she was. People like to tell me comforting things. Maybe she was a sign your grandmother is watching over you, maybe she was a guardian, maybe she meant well. But my grandmother never sat that still in her life. And whatever stood behind me in that video looked at me the way people look at something they're owed. Sometimes, late at night, I find myself rearranging our dining chairs, counting them, making sure there's never an extra one. I've stopped putting out place cards. Somewhere between sleep and waking, I feel the impression of someone sitting on the mattress near my feet, the weight barely enough to dip the blanket, but real. I don't dare look. Not yet, she said soon. I used to roll my eyes at people who said wedding dresses had energy. My name is Layla, I'm 26, and I almost died on my wedding day because of a piece of lace. It started with money like most stupid decisions do. The dress itself wiped out most of my savings. The venue, the catering, the flowers. Every time I opened a spreadsheet, my chest tightened. By the time I started thinking about accessories, I just wanted something beautiful that didn't add another 5 digits to the total. My mother offered her veil, yellow tulle wrapped carefully in tissue, smelling faintly of camphor and old perfume. When she unfolded it, the fabric crackled like paper. The lace was delicate, but the style belonged to pictures in her album, not my Pinterest board. It's classic, I said, which is a polite way of saying no. She hid the hurt badly, and I felt guilty enough to promise I'd at least look around before making a final decision. That's how I ended up at the antique store. It was the kind of shop you don't notice until you need it. Squeezed between a closed-down pharmacy and a nail salon, its window crowded with tarnished silver, cracked dolls, and jewelry that had seen too many wrists. The sign above the door read, "Ever After Antiques," in faded gold script. The bell over the door gave a tired jingle when I walked in. The air smelled of dust, old wood, and something sweeter underneath, like dried flowers that had been forgotten in books. "Hello," I called, stepping carefully between stacks of furniture and glass cases. Light filtered through grimy front windows, turning everything sepia. The temperature inside was a strange mix. Pockets of stale warmth near the lamps, sudden cool drafts that traced the back of my neck as if following me. "Just a moment," a voice answered from deeper inside. I wandered past a row of dress forms draped in garments from other decades. One wore a 60s mini dress, another a beaded flapper gown. At the end of the row, half hidden behind a wardrobe, a dress caught my eye. It wasn't the dress exactly. It was the veil. The dress itself was simple, ivory, A-line, a style that could still work today with some alterations. But the veil cascaded from a small comb at the top, falling in layers of sheer tulle edged with intricate lace. Even in the dim light, tiny beads along the edge caught what little brightness there was, scattering it in soft pinpricks. I stepped closer. The veil pooled on the floor, a faint shimmer over the scuffed wood. Without thinking, I reached out. The fabric slid between my fingers like cool water, softer than any tulle I'd touched at modern boutiques, almost weightless. Goosebumps tingled along my arm, but I told myself it was just the temperature. I didn't notice the woman until she was right behind me. "Careful," she said, in a voice that scraped slightly, like it had rust on it. "Some things don't like being woken up too fast." I jerked my hand back. The woman was in her late 50s or early 60s, hair scraped back into a bun, wisps escaping like frayed thread. Her eyes were sharp, an unsettling pale color that made it hard to hold her gaze for long. A tape measure hung around her neck like a loose noose. "Sorry," I said. I've never seen a veil like this." She studied me for a moment, then the veil, then me again, as if comparing two images in her mind. "It suits you," she said finally. "She was about your height." "Who?" "The original bride," the woman replied. "Wore it once. Almost." She tilted her head. "You're getting married soon?" "In 3 weeks," I said, glancing at the veil again. I was supposed to use my mom's, but I wanted something different. "Of course you did." Her lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. "Everyone wants their own story." She reached out and lifted a corner of the veil, letting it fall again like a sigh. "This one is from 1923. Hand-stitched lace, imported beads. It belonged to a young woman named Eleanor Hart." "Did she sell it?" I asked. "She died," the woman said plainly. "Moments before her wedding." Hart stopped as they were pinning in the veil. Some said fear, some said joy. "Hart doesn't care why it breaks." The story should have made me step back. Instead, I glanced at myself in a nearby mirror, trying to imagine the veil framing my face instead of the ghost mannequins. "How much?" I asked. The woman named a price so low it made no sense for the quality. I hesitated, suspicion flickering, but she added, "Things want to be chosen. They stay too long, they get restless. Better to let them out." Like I was doing her a favor. I bought it. At home, my mother wrinkled her nose when I showed her. "Used?" she said. "You don't know what kind of history." "It's beautiful," I insisted, "and we can have it cleaned." "It's just fabric, Mama." The cleaner refused. "We don't take antique lace that old," the woman at the shop said, pressing her lips together. "Too fragile. We could ruin it." So it stayed as it was, faintly scented with old powder and something floral, edges slightly yellowed, beads a little duller up close. When I tried it on in my bedroom, pinning it clumsily into my hair, I felt ridiculous and ethereal at the same time. The first time I wore it, I heard the crying. It was faint, like someone sobbing through a wall. A woman's voice, thin and strained. Not words, just the raw sound of begging without language. I froze, veil slipping slightly over my ear. Then my phone buzzed. My mom called me downstairs for tea. The kettle shrieked, and the sound in my head scattered like smoke. By the time I took the veil off and checked the hallway, the house was quiet. Stress, I told myself. Just your brain making noise. I kept telling myself that right up until the ceremony. The day of the wedding was warm for September. The venue was a renovated mill. A big hall with high beams, exposed brick, and huge windows that let in too much light. The place smelled of polished wood, fresh flowers, and faintly of the river just beyond the property line. In the bridal suite, the air conditioning hummed, trying and failing to keep up with the heat of too many bodies and too much nervous energy. Hairspray clouded the air, mixing with the sugary scent of the cake waiting downstairs. "You look like a painting," my cousin Zara said, stepping back as she finished pinning the veil. Her fingers brushed my scalp, leaving a trail of bobby pins digging lightly into skin. The veil settled over my shoulders and down my back, soft as breath. The lace edged across my forehead, a delicate frame. The comb bit into my hair just enough to feel secure. I inhaled to say thank you. The crying started again, clearer this time. Not faint background noise, but a sound just behind my ears, like someone whispering directly into the space between my skull and my skin. Sobbing, desperate, ragged. Each breath hitched in my own throat like it was trying to sync with mine. "Are you okay?" Zara asked. Her reflection in the mirror looked concerned. "You went really pale. You don't hear that?" I asked. My voice came out thin. She frowned. "Hear what?" "The music." Underneath the sound of the string quartet tuning downstairs, the crying continued. A choked word surfaced, then another. "Please, please, not again." My vision tunneled. I grabbed the edge of the vanity to steady myself. The wood felt solid under my fingertips, cool varnish grounding me. "It's just nerves," I lied quickly. "Too much coffee. I'm fine." She hugged me, careful not to crush the veil, then joined the others to line up. The room emptied, leaving me alone with my reflection. The veil felt heavier. What had been almost weightless now dragged at my head. A thin pressure at my scalp that crept down my neck, like invisible hands smoothing it flat, tighter, tighter. My skin prickled underneath it, every hair on my body standing on end. "Stop," I whispered, not sure who I was talking to. The crying hitched, became a low, keening wail. A knock at the door made me jump. The wedding coordinator poked her head in, her headset slightly askew, cheeks flushed from running around. "Ready?" she chirped. "They're seated. Time to make your grand entrance." I nodded because that's what you do. You nod and you walk and you pretend you don't hear someone else's pain buzzing like a wasp behind your eyes. The corridor to the ceremony hall was lined with framed sepia photos of the mill from its working days. The air there was cooler, edged with damp from the nearby river. My dress swished softly around my legs, the veil whispering against my back. Each step made the crying swell and recede, like surf hitting a shore. At the end of the hall, the double doors waited, slightly ajar. Through them, I could see the backs of heads, flickering candlelight, the arch of flowers where Daniel stood, shifting from foot to foot. His silhouette, broad shoulders and nervous hands, should have calmed me. Instead, my pulse pounded harder. The music changed. The coordinator gently adjusted my train and veil, murmured something encouraging I didn't catch. Then the doors opened. Heat rolled over me. Body heat from 100 guests, candle flames, sun slanting through tall windows. The hall smelled of roses and polished wood and the faint tang of sweat under perfume. I took my first step onto the runner. The veil tightened, not a metaphor physically. The comb dug deeper into my scalp, the tool contracting around my face, the edge biting into my throat. It felt as if someone had grabbed the back of it and twisted, like wringing water from cloth. My breath cut off. I choked, hand flying to my neck. The guests blurred. Gasps rippled through the room. The music wavered, then stopped entirely as someone in the quartet dropped their bow. The crying in my ears became a scream. It was high and shrill, layered, like several voices overlapping, all coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. The sound pierced the air, cutting through the murmurs, The shouts, the scrape of chairs. My knees buckled. I felt the runner scrape my skin through the dress as I dropped, fingers clawing at the veil. The lace edge sliced into my fingertips like tiny teeth. "Get it off her," someone shouted. My mother, I think. Or Daniel. Or both. Hands descended, not one pair, but many. Fingers tugging, pulling, trying to untangle the veil from my hair. Each yank sent sharp jolts of pain across my scalp. The comb seemed fused to my skull. The more they pulled, the tighter it felt around my throat. Couldn't get air. Black spots blossomed at the edges of my vision, blooming like ink in water. The hall spun, chandeliers and flower arrangements and faces warping into a swirling mass. Through it all, the scream didn't break for air, didn't hitch or falter. It vibrated in my teeth, rang in my bones. "Please," I croaked or tried to. My lips moved, but no sound of my own came out. And then, as if someone had made a decision I wasn't part of, the veil let go. It snapped upward, away from my face. For a split second, it hovered above me, the tool rippling as if caught in a wind no one else felt. Hands fell back, people stumbling away. The scream grew sharper, louder, drilling through the air. The veil twisted in midair, curling in on itself like a living thing. Tool coiled and uncoiled, lace edges fluttering like frantic fingers. It darted sideways, knocking over a candle. Wax spilled in a slow-motion arc, flames licked up a floral arrangement, then sputtered as someone threw water. The scream ricocheted off the walls, off the high beams, off the glass of the windows. Some guests clapped hands over their ears, faces contorted. Others backed away, chairs scraping harshly. I lay on the floor, coughing, each breath cutting my throat raw, as I watched my veil, no, not mine, never mine, writhe in the air like something drowning. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the scream cut off. The veil dropped to the floor. It lay there, inert, a limp circle of tulle and lace. Someone kicked it away from me, as if expecting it to leap again. Didn't. The hall was suddenly, jarringly quiet, except for my ragged breathing and the distant hum of the air conditioning. A few guests fainted. The coordinator vomited into a potted plant. The officiant clutched his chest like he was checking that his heart was still there. We didn't finish the ceremony. Paramedics checked me in a small side room that smelled of cleaning chemicals and fear. My throat bore faint red marks where the veil had cut in. My scalp bled in tiny points where the comb had been ripped out, hair tangled in its teeth. "It looks like you got caught on something," one paramedic said, trying to make it sound like an explanation. "Maybe the veil snagged and someone pulled too hard." "What about the screaming?" Daniel asked, his knuckles white around my hand. The paramedic glanced at his partner. "Panic," he said carefully. "A lot of people shouting at once. The acoustics in there." We both knew he was lying. We could hear it in his voice. That scream had not been human. We didn't talk about finishing the wedding. No one said the words. The guests left in clumps, some crossing themselves, some refusing to look at me as they passed. My mother alternated between sobbing and praying under her breath. Daniel's mother suggested we take this as a sign, and I had to be physically held back from screaming at her. The antique store was closed the next day. The sign was gone. The windows were dark. Where there had been crowded displays, there was nothing but dust and sun-bleached outlines on the floor. A for-lease notice flapped in the breeze behind the glass. When I called the number listed on my receipt, it was disconnected. It was the venue's security footage that kept me from writing it all off as trauma and mass hysteria. The manager called us in a week later. His hands shook as he operated the playback. The screen's glow turned his skin a sickly color. "This is from the main hall camera," he said. "You should see this." We watched me walk in, stagger, fall. The guests rushing, the veil tightening, though on the grainy footage it looked less like fabric shifting and more like shadow thickening around my head. Then we watched it tear free. On screen, the veil didn't just flutter. It stretched. For a split second, the tulle thinned and elongated, like something inside it was pushing, pressing against a membrane. A suggestion of a face surfaced, 2 darker hollows where eyes would be, a smear where a mouth might form, open in a silent scream the camera didn't record. The veil surged upward as if yanked by invisible hands. The video's audio captured only a muffled, distorted shriek, like static forced into the shape of a sound. Then it dropped. The footage continued as staff cleared the hall, as paramedics arrived. People moved in and out, shadows lengthening as the day wore on. Hours later, when the hall was empty and dark, the camera kept recording. At 11:32 p.m., the veil moved. No one was near it. The air was still. One moment it lay crumpled near the side wall. The next, it rose slowly into the air, tulle unfurling like a jellyfish expanding in deep water. The security camera had no sound for that section. The image was grainy, monochrome, but I could almost hear that scream again just from looking at it. The veil drifted through the air, not fluttering like cloth, but gliding with horrible purpose. It moved down the aisle, pausing over each row, hovering above chairs, as if inspecting them, as if looking for someone. It reached the exit, hovered there for a long moment. Then it slipped through the small gap at the bottom of the door. The manager paused the footage there, as the veil vanished into the sliver of darkness. We sat in silence. My throat felt tight again, but this time it wasn't the memory. It was the thought of that thing out there, no longer bound to a dress or a shop or a hall. Eleanor Hart died in 1923, moments before her wedding. I sometimes wonder how many brides since then have tried on that veil, heard nothing, felt nothing, were spared. I wonder why it chose me, or if that's just how my brain tries to make sense of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I haven't set a new date. Every time I pass a shop window with dresses, my chest clamps down. I change streets rather than walk past bridal boutiques. I can't bear the thought of white fabric near my face. But sometimes, on windless days, I see plastic bags or scraps of cloth lifting from the ground in strange, deliberate arcs. Pieces of paper stuck to fences fluttering in a pattern that doesn't match the breeze. And at night, when the house is very quiet, I hear a sound just at the edge of hearing. Not quite crying, not quite screaming. Breath-catching. Waiting. I used to joke that the worst thing that could happen on my wedding day was tripping down the aisle. My name is Nita. I'm 29 years old, technically still engaged on paper, and my groom has been missing for 8 months. They still call it a disappearance. That word sounds so gentle, like he wandered off in a fog and forgot the way back. It doesn't fit what I saw or what we found. We got married, or tried to, at a converted farmhouse on the edge of the city. You know the type. White stone walls, fairy lights strung over a courtyard, a big glass-walled hall opening onto an endless, flat field. The kind of place Instagram loves. The kind of place where bad things shouldn't be able to happen in daylight. It was early November, the air the kind of cold that bites your nose but lets you still convince yourself a backless dress is a good idea. The sky was a thin, washed-out blue, a few wisps of cloud like someone had smudged the edges. The grass in the field behind the venue was short and yellowing, damp with dew that never fully burned off. Inside, the hall was warm and bright, smelling of eucalyptus, roses, and whatever cleaner they'd used on the polished wooden floor. Candles flickered along the aisle. Soft music played from hidden speakers, a piano cover of some pop song our parents didn't recognize. His name was Ahil. He was the kind of person who filled a room without trying. Loud laugh, big hands, constant motion. That morning, though, he'd been quieter, his shirt sleeves rolled up, fiddling with his cufflinks like he was trying to wind himself tighter. "You look like you're about to attend your own funeral," I teased, standing on my tiptoes to straighten his tie in the little side room where we were doing the first look photos. He smirked, but his eyes didn't match. "You're the one in white," he said. "If anyone should be worried." His hands were cold when he cupped my face to kiss my forehead. His skin smelled faintly of his usual cologne. Citrus, something woody, and underneath that, stress sweat. I felt the tiny tremor in his fingers. "You okay?" I asked more softly. He pulled back, glanced at the door, then out the window. From there, you could see the field stretching out behind the hall. Flat, empty, bordered by a sagging wire fence and a line of bare trees. Did you sleep? I pressed. Not much, he admitted. He hesitated, then added, weird dreams. I kept waking up sure I'd missed something. Like what? I asked. He shook his head, as if trying to physically dislodge the thought. Doesn't matter. He forced a grin. I'm here, right? That's what counts. The photographer bustled in then, efficient and oblivious, rearranging us into poses, telling us to tilt our faces toward the light. For a while, it all felt normal. Awkward laughter, the weight of my dress, the way the hairspray fumes in the room made my eyes sting. It was only later, when I watched the security footage, that I realized he kept glancing over my shoulder toward the field. Even then, by the time the guests were seated, my makeup had been redone, my veil adjusted 3 times, and my mother had cried at least 4 times over how grown-up I looked. The bridal suite upstairs smelled like perfume, hot hair tools, and nervous bodies trapped in one room too long. My dress scratched faintly at my ribs every time I breathed, the boning pressing into skin that already felt too tight. The coordinator stuck her head in. Her headset crackled when she spoke. 10 minutes, guys. We're lining up the parents now. Hill, we'll need you and the groomsmen in place. He kissed my knuckles, quick and hard. If I bolt, you have permission to hunt me down, he joked. Don't you dare, I said. He left with the coordinator, his cologne trailing after him for a second before the door clicked shut. The room felt emptier than it should have, that brief vacuum when someone takes their energy with them. We weren't supposed to see each other again until the aisle. 10 minutes later, my father's phone buzzed. Then my cousin's. A quick, silent flurry of notifications moved through the room like a draft. The coordinator came back, smile a little too wide. We're just delaying a few minutes, she said. The groom needed the restroom. It's fine, my mother said, waving a hand. Men and their bladders. We laughed because that was the normal thing to do. I checked the time. 2:47 p.m. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The jokes started to feel brittle. Someone tried a story about another wedding where the cake collapsed. I smiled with my mouth and not with anything else. Can you check on him? I asked the coordinator finally. Of course, she said. He's probably just nerves. She left. The hallway outside swallowed her footsteps. My phone was on the vanity, screen dark. I picked it up, more to have something solid in my hand than anything. No new notifications from Hill. Our last message thread was from that morning. Him sending a blurry selfie of his mangled tie. Me replying with a photo of my half-done makeup and the caption, "Too late to run." The minutes dragged. The music from downstairs looped, the same instrumental track starting again. My mouth went dry. The dress weighed twice as much as it had earlier. When the door opened again, it wasn't the coordinator. It was his twin sister, Hiba, her lipstick smudged at one corner, eyes rimmed in panicky red. Something's wrong, she said. Those 2 words were worse than any scream. My father stood up so fast his chair scraped harshly. What do you mean, wrong? He went to the restroom by the ceremony hall, she said, voice shaking. He didn't come back. They thought he was just, but he's not answering his phone. It's been almost half an hour. I didn't realize I was already moving until I felt the carpet of the hallway under my bare feet. The train of my dress dragging like something trying to hold me back. The air outside the bridal suite was cooler, tinged with the smell of the industrial kitchen downstairs and a faint hint of something else. Bleach, metal, and an undercurrent of damp earth. The corridor to the restroom was narrower, dimmer. The noise from the hall muffled as we walked away from it, replaced by the hum of an air vent and the occasional pop of electrical wiring in the walls. My skin crawled with each step. The men's restroom door was at the end, a plain white door with a silver handle and a small sign. Outside it, the coordinator stood with 2 of the groomsmen, faces tight. "We've knocked," one of them said as I approached, his voice too loud in the small space. "He's not answering. I thought maybe he was, The coordinator's smile fluttered and died. But there's no sound. I pressed my ear to the door. The painted wood felt cold against my skin, faintly textured. On the other side, There was nothing, no flushing, no muttered curses, no running tap. Just a thick silence that felt occupied. "Hey, Hill," I called. My voice came out thin. "It's me. Open the door, please." "Nothing. We have a key," the coordinator said. "We tried it, but the door wouldn't." "Wouldn't what?" I snapped. "It wouldn't open, like something was pushing back." Her cheeks flushed. "It sounds crazy, I know, but try again," I said. She fumbled a key into the lock, the metal clinking against the handle. The mechanism turned with a heavy clunk. She pushed. The door gave an inch, then stopped. It felt as if someone on the other side had braced their whole weight against it. My chest tightened. Without thinking, I shoved my shoulder against the door. The wood pressed into bone, hard enough to hurt. For a heartbeat, it held. Then, with a sharp jerk, it flew inward. The sudden lack of resistance made me stumble into the room. The smell hit me first. Harsh disinfectant layered over something metallic and raw, like the air after you've bitten your tongue. The lights hummed overhead, a sickly fluorescent buzz. The restroom was empty. 2 stalls, both doors open. 1 urinal. A sink with a mirror above it. The glass slightly fogged, as if someone had recently exhaled on it. A damp patch on the floor where water had splashed near the tap. And the door. The inside of the door, the side that had been facing Ahill, was covered in scratches. Not old graffiti, not the half-hearted key marks you see in public bathrooms. These were fresh, jagged gouges running in frantic, overlapping lines from the handle down to almost floor level. Some were shallow, some deep enough to splinter the wood into white, ragged curls. Bits of something pale were caught in the grooves. For a few seconds my brain refused to name it. Then I saw a small crescent lying on the tile, half a fingernail torn cleanly off. My vision blurred. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. I touched one of the scratches with trembling fingers. The wood was damp, slightly tacky. When I pulled my hand back, there were faint red smears on my fingertips. "Ahill," I whispered. My voice bounced back at me from the tiles, thin and too high. There was nowhere for him to be hiding. No dropped phone, no crumpled jacket. Just that smell, those marks, and the mirror rimmed with moisture. Behind me, someone retched into a sink. The rest of the day moved like a badly edited film. Security was called. The manager, pale and sweating, ushered us into a cramped office that smelled of stale coffee and printer ink. The security monitor glowed in the dim, greenish light. "This is the hallway camera," he said, his finger hovering over the keyboard. "Outside the restroom." The timestamp at the bottom of the screen read 2:43 p.m. There was Ahill walking down the corridor toward the camera. He adjusted his cufflink as he came, the familiar, casual motion catching in my chest like a hook. He wore his dark tux, the white shirt crisp, the boutonniere. A single red rose and eucalyptus sprig, pinned neatly to his lapel. He walked past the camera's field of view. A second later, the men's restroom door swung open on screen. He entered. The door shut behind him. 2:44 p.m. We watched. 2:45. No movement. 2:46. A flicker. The image hiccuped, tearing horizontally for a split second like an old VHS tape. The light in the corridor bent, the lines of the floor stretching, warping, then snapping back. 2:47. The door remained closed. No one walked past. No one went in. No one came out. We watched until the timestamp rolled past 3 p.m., 3:10, 3:20. The hall stayed empty. "It must have missed him," my father said, voice hoarse. "Maybe he went out of frame somehow and—" "There are no blind spots near that door," the security guy said quietly. "We had them check. Insurance reasons. And the only other way out of that restroom is a tiny, bolted window that opens onto the sidewall. We've checked. No signs of anything." The police arrived before they told the guests anything. People milled in the hall, voices low, the scent of uneaten food thickening the air. Through it all, the big glass wall looked out over the field, the sky turning a deeper gray. They searched the building first. Every cupboard, every storage room, the cellar that smelled of damp stone and old wine. Nothing. Then they brought in the dogs. I watched from the edge of the patio as the handlers led them into the field. The wind had picked up, sharp and cold, threading through my dress and into my skin. The grass brushed against the dog's legs, leaves clicking softly. Every breath tasted like wet earth and something electric, the metallic edge of an oncoming storm. The dogs sniffed around the door, then pulled, noses to the ground, bodies taut. They followed an invisible line straight out into the field. No hesitation, no circling. They stopped abruptly about 50 meters out, in the middle of nowhere, no tree, no marker, no dip in the terrain, just flat ground. They started circling, whimpering, tails down. One of them sat and refused to move, its whole body shaking. The handlers exchanged looks. The grass there was slightly pressed down, as if someone had been lying there very recently. You don't realize how much heat a body holds until you touch where it used to be. His jacket lay there, folded in a neat square. His bow tie sat on top of it like a little black cross. The boutonniere was still pinned to the lapel, the rose petals dark and soft. I knelt beside it, the hem of my dress soaking up moisture from the ground. My fingers hovered above the fabric. "Don't touch," one of the officers said automatically, but he was too late. The tux jacket was warm, not room temperature warm, not sun warmed from earlier warm. Warm like someone had just taken it off moments ago. The heat of a human body still trapped in the weave. The grass underneath was cool and damp. They found his phone in the inside pocket. The lead detective brought it over, gloved hands careful. The screen was locked, but a notification glowed at the top. A message sent at 2:46 p.m. To me. They unlocked it with his fingerprint, still stored in the phone's memory. A pattern of whorls and lines that no longer existed on any living hand. The message thread opened. My last text that morning. His reply. Then, on its own line, sent 4 minutes before anyone noticed he was gone. It's here. No emoji. No context. Just those 2 words. I pulled out my own phone with clumsy, numb fingers. The same message sat there unread. Time stamped 2:46 p.m. I hadn't looked. I'd been too busy smoothing my dress, checking my lipstick, waiting for the cue to walk. People like to ask if I think he ran, that he folded his jacket, put down his phone, and walked away. They haven't seen the scratches in that door. They ruled out foul play they could explain. No sign of a struggle in the hall. No other footprints in the field besides the search parties. No evidence of anyone else being involved. They wrote, "Missing under suspicious circumstances," and left the rest blank. I've seen the footage so many times the hallway lives behind my eyelids now. I've stared at each frame of the glitch around 2:46 until my vision blurred, convinced I could see something. An extra shadow, a shape under the door, a curve of darkness that looks too intentional to be random noise. I've gone back to that field 3 times, even though my therapist says I shouldn't. In daylight, it looks so ordinary it feels like an insult. The grass grows back. The soil is thick and black when you step on it, the faint smell of something rotting underneath from old leaves. Cars hiss by on the road in the distance. Birds land, peck, take off again. Nothing moves that shouldn't. At night, it's different. The farmhouse rents out in the off-season. They do corporate retreats now. The lights in the hall burn until 10, then snap off, leaving the glass a dark mirror. The field turns into a flat, black ocean. The air tastes colder there than it does in the parking lot, the same way the air in the restroom tasted wrong. The last time I went, I stood at the edge of the patio, the concrete cold under my thin shoes, and stared out into the dark. The wind brushed my veil of hair against my cheek. My throat tightened around nothing. I listened. For a long time, there was just the rustle of grass and the distant hum of traffic. Then, faintly, like a sound carried through walls of water, I heard it. Fingernails on wood. Not loud, not obvious. Just a dragging, desperate scrape over and over, as if someone was still trying, wherever he is, to claw his way back to a door that no one on this side can see. Some nights, in my apartment, my bathroom door swells slightly from steam. It sticks when I try to open it. I stand there with my hand on the handle and my heart beating too fast, imagining scratch marks on the other side. I haven't painted the inside of any of my doors since November. His message is still pinned at the top of our thread. It's here. I don't know what it is. Place, a thing, a moment. A mistake. I only know that if I ever figure it out, it won't give him back. And I'm terrified that one day, when my phone buzzes in the middle of the night, I'll look down and see a new message from his number. Time-stamped 2:46 a.m., repeating itself. It's here. It's here. It's here. I've spent 10 years photographing other people's happiest days, and I can tell you this much. The camera doesn't lie. It doesn't always show what you want to see, but it doesn't lie. My name is Cameron. I'm 34, a freelance wedding photographer, and until last winter my biggest professional fear was corrupted memory cards and drunk uncles swinging on the dance floor with full glasses. Now I'm scared of the blank spaces in my own photos. The wedding that ruined me was at a lakeside resort about an hour outside the city. A fancy place. White marquee, manicured lawns, a pier stretching over a dark, still oval of water. It was early December, cold enough that every breath turned to mist, but the family had insisted on an outdoor ceremony for the aesthetic. I arrived 3 hours early, like I always do. It was a gray afternoon, the kind of light that makes everything look flat until the sun starts dropping. The resort smelled of pine, wet wood, and the faint, clean chemical tang of chlorine from the ornamental fountains near the entrance. Inside the bridal suite, heaters hummed, fighting a losing battle against drafts sneaking under old window frames. Makeup was spread across every surface. Hairspray turned the air sticky. The bride, Monor, sat in front of the mirror while her stylist pinned the last rhinestone into her hair. "You're sure it's not too much?" she asked me when I raised the camera. "Trust me," I said, backing up, framing her in the window light. "On a day like this, you can't have too much sparkle." I checked my settings: ISO 800, shutter 1/200, aperture 2.8, then pressed the shutter. The familiar click soothed me like a heartbeat. I checked the preview. Her face was sharp, the background soft. Good. I didn't see him then. Not in the room, not in the mirror, not anywhere I could point to and say, there, that's where it started. The ceremony took place just before sunset. The marquee had been opened on one side, so the lake served as a backdrop. The air outside was sharper now, snapping at exposed skin. Guests huddled in shawls and coats over their formal clothes, their breath rising in faint plumes. I moved through the crowd, swapping lenses, adjusting angles. I focused on the groom straightening his tie, the bride's father wiping his eyes, children fidgeting in their seats. Behind them, the lake's surface was dull metal, unbroken. The officiant began. I took my usual wide shots from the aisle, then circled to the back. From there, I could capture the couple from behind, the guests' faces in front of them, the lake beyond. It's one of my signature angles. Clients always loved that shot. I lifted the camera, half listening to the vows. Through the viewfinder, I saw something that made my finger freeze over the shutter. Behind the couple, where there should have been only the lake and a row of decorative lanterns, stood a shape. Tall. Too tall, a head above the groom. Perfectly still. No color, no detail. Just a long, dark silhouette, like someone had taken a human figure and filled it in with absence. I lowered the camera. To my naked eye, there was only the lake, the lanterns, the wooden posts of the pier. No one standing there. I raised the camera again. The shape was back, centered between the couple, a few meters behind them, too close to the water's edge. Someone coughed behind me, and I flinched, accidentally pressing the shutter. The camera clicked, capturing whatever it thought was real. I told myself it was lens flare. Some trick of light, reflection off the water, maybe a blown-out guest in the wrong spot. I didn't have time to chimp every image. The vows were ending. People were crying. I kept shooting, moving through the sequence I'd performed 100 times. It wasn't until the cocktail hour, when the guests were busy with canapes and mulled wine, that I had a moment to scroll through what I'd taken. The first pass was fine. Close-ups of rings, laughing bridesmaids, the awkward handshake between two estranged relatives. Normal. Safe. Then I reached the ceremony shots. In the back of the aisle photo, the one with the couple in front and the lake behind, he was there. A tall, black silhouette with no features, no edges I could fully define. He was standing behind the couple, maybe 5 or 6 meters away. Not transparent exactly, but wrong. The light didn't behave around him. It bent, subtly, like heat wavering above asphalt. In the next photo, he was closer. No movement blur, no transitional frames. One shot, far. Next shot, a step nearer. Right between 2 lanterns that should have been in front of him, but weren't. He had no face. Where a face should have been was a flat oval of sickly white, like paper reflecting light but revealing nothing underneath. I zoomed in until individual pixels broke apart. No eyes, no mouth, just blankness. "Cameron, you got shots of my parents, right?" Someone called. I nearly dropped the camera. I snapped it back to my chest. Yeah. Got them," I said, voice drier than my throat felt. "I'll grab a few more in a bit." I should have shown someone then, said something. But I knew what happens when vendors make noise at weddings. They get blamed for ruining the mood. So I told myself, again, that it had to be a glitch. Maybe a rendering error. Maybe I'd fix it in post. The reception moved inside after dark. The hall was warm, golden light pooling under chandeliers, shadows stretching along the polished floor. The DJ played safe, middle-of-the-road hits. Glasses clinked. The clatter of cutlery and laughter filled the space. I moved around the room as I always do, catching toasts, hugs, half-drunk uncles attempting dance moves their bodies weren't built for. In every batch of shots I checked, he was there. Not always in the same spot. Sometimes near the far wall, indistinct and half-lost in the crowd. Sometimes standing directly behind whoever I was focusing on. In one photo, he loomed behind the bride's mother as she laughed, his blank, white face hovering just over her shoulder, always facing the camera, always too tall, too still. But when I lowered the camera, there was nobody there. By the time the first dance started, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my lens cap. The bride and groom stepped onto the floor, the lights dimming around them, fairy lights and votive candles creating tiny constellations across the room. The song they'd picked was slow, syrupy, a personal favorite of theirs, I'd been told. I switched to my fast prime lens, dialed down the aperture, checked my settings more times than necessary. Work routine, anchor routine. They started to sway. Guests ringed the dance floor, forming a loose circle. I took a few shots from the side, then moved behind the couple to get the crowd in the background. Through the viewfinder, my breath stopped. He stood directly behind the bride. At first I thought it was just some tall guest, maybe a cousin stepping too close. But no one was behind her in the real world, just the polished reflection of the floor. In the frame, though, the faceless figure loomed, inches from her back. His long, dark body seemed to melt out of the surrounding shadow, but that white oval where his face should be was stark, visible even in low light. He was leaning down. His blank face hovered near her veil, near her ear, as if whispering something. My thumb flicked the flash on without me thinking. Old habit when light is tricky. I lifted the camera higher, trying to steady my hands. I took the shot. The flash detonated, stark and brief, freezing the moment in a slice of harsh white. For that fraction of a second, the world went silent. In the glare of the flash, he wasn't just a silhouette anymore. The camera's burst illuminated a figure inches from Manor's face. No features still, but the white surface where his face should be glowed like bone left too long in the sun. The blankness wasn't smooth anymore. It seemed stretched, as if something underneath was pressing outwards, trying to push through. His hand, long fingers that weren't quite fingers, rested lightly on her shoulder. I gasped and lowered the camera. Eyes tearing from the afterimage burned into my retinas. There was no one behind her, just her, mid-step, her expression dreamy and dazed. The crowd around us blinked, some laughing at being blinded by the flash. Then she crumpled. Her knees buckled as if someone had yanked her strings. She went down hard, her groom stumbling, grabbing at nothing. A flush of screams, chairs scraping. The music cut off mid-lyric. I pushed through the ring of bodies as they closed in, adrenaline hammering under my skin. Monor lay on the floor, her dress a white spill around her. Her eyes were open, pupils blown wide, staring at the chandelier above. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, rapid stutters. "Give her space," someone shouted. "Don't crowd her." Her lips moved. I leaned in, the camera banging against my chest. "Don't let him touch me," she whispered. Her voice was shredded, barely sound at all. Her gaze wasn't focused on anyone in the circle. It was fixed just over my shoulder, at a point in the empty air. A hand grabbed my arm, yanking me back as paramedics. How had they been called so fast? Rushed in. The hall flooded with motion and noise. Someone was crying. Someone else was praying under their breath. I stumbled to the side, heart slamming, ears ringing. The DJ filled the silence with some neutral track that only made everything feel more unreal. I checked the last photo. The preview showed the bride and groom on the dance floor. The flash had lit them up, every bead on her dress, every crease in his suit sharp as knives. Behind her, wrapping around her like an embrace, was the tall figure. His face, if you can call it that, filled half the frame, hovering near her own. A blank, white oval stretched tight like wax over a shape that wasn't human, wasn't animal, wasn't anything I had a name for. One of his hands rested on her shoulder, fingers splayed. The other curled towards her veil, not quite touching it, like he was reaching for something he felt belonged to him. When I looked up from the photo, my vision swam. The hall tilted. The edges of my sight went dark. The last thing I remember from that night is the cold of the floor against my cheek and the sound of my own camera skittering away across the wood as it slipped from my hand. They say I disappeared. Not into thin air, that's too clean, but from the narrative. I was there 1 second, collapsing by the edge of the dance floor, and then everything after that becomes a blur of other people's accounts. They found my camera under a buffet table, lens cracked, still on, the memory card intact. They didn't find me until dawn. I woke up lying on damp grass at the edge of the lake, my shirt half unbuttoned, my hands pruny and cold. The sky above was a pale, indifferent gray. Mist crawled along the surface of the water, reaching thin fingers toward the shore. My clothes smelled of mud and something else, something metallic and stale, like coins held too long in a sweaty palm. I had no idea how I'd gotten there. The last thing I remembered was looking at that photo. When I staggered back to the hotel, my feet numb, they told me the bride had been taken to the hospital. Panic attack, they said first, then possible seizure. The doctors couldn't agree on a neat label. She came back to herself hours later with bruises on her shoulders like long, pale fingerprints and no memory of collapsing. No one wanted to talk about the photos. They wanted them, of course. The family called, the planner emailed, everyone politely frantic. "Just send over what you have, we'll sort it out," they said. "We need something." I tried to work on them. At home, in the dark of my editing room, the screen's glow turned my fingers into pale claws on the keyboard. I opened the files one by one. In every single image that mattered, he stood behind them, sometimes half visible, sometimes clear as day. In the cake-cutting photos, he hovered near her left shoulder, closer in each frame like a slideshow of approach. In the family portraits, he loomed at the back, where the backdrop should have been empty. I didn't remember seeing him through the lens that often, but the camera had. In the very last photo, the one I'd taken before everything swallowed itself, he wasn't behind her anymore. He faced the camera. He was holding her veil in both hands, the white fabric trailing from his grip like captured smoke. The bride was mid-turn, her face blurred, unaware. He stood just beyond her, in the empty space that should have been safe. His featureless face was angled down toward the veil, claiming it. I stared until my eyes burned. The longer I looked, the more certain I felt that the white of his face wasn't reflecting my monitor's light at all. It was emitting it. I tried to delete the photos. My fingers hovered over the keys. Then my computer screen went black. Not off, not crashed, just black. In that blank reflection, I saw myself sitting there, pale and shaken, behind my mirrored head, in the darkness of my little editing room. Something tall and wrong loomed, a paler oval hanging over my shoulder like a second, warped moon. I didn't turn around. The screen flickered back to life on its own. The folder with the wedding images was gone. In its place was a single file, untitled, no extension, just a white icon. I clicked it because I'm an idiot. The image filled the screen. The lake at night, the pier stretching into darkness. No couple, no guests, no decorations. Just the water, black and flat. And at the end of the pier, a tall, faceless figure holding something long and white that fluttered in a wind I couldn't feel. I closed the laptop so hard it snapped. That was 3 months ago. Since then, I've taken exactly 0 new bookings. I tell people I'm on hiatus, rebranding, focusing on commercial work. The truth is, every time I lift a camera to my eye, even my phone, I feel the hair rise on the back of my neck, as if something is leaning in, eager to be seen. The resort called last week, not to ask for photos, to tell me Manur had been back. She stood at the edge of the lake at dusk, they said, in a simple coat and jeans. No dress, no veil. She stayed there for 2 hours, according to the security guard, just staring at the water. He went down once to ask if she was okay. She didn't respond. He left her alone because her expression frightened him. On the security feed he reviewed later, she wasn't alone. He played the footage for me over a shaky video call. Phone pointed at his computer screen. The quality was bad, grainy and pixelated. But I saw enough. Manur stood at the lakeside, coat pulled tight, hair loose around her shoulders. A dark shape towered behind her, taller than it had looked in my photos, taller than any human. The recording glitched. For one frame, barely a flicker, its blank white face was turned directly toward the camera, as if it knew it was being observed. Then the feed tore and snapped back. The shape was gone. Manur was alone again, clutching at her shoulder like something hurt there. I could have told him to delete it. I could have blocked the number, moved cities, thrown every one of my cameras into the lake. Instead, that night, I found myself scrolling back through old weddings, other couples, other dances, looking for stray shadows, blank faces, tall figures at the edge of the frame. I found more than I wanted to. Different venues, different years, different brides and grooms. In the corner of a shot by a window, at the back of a church, reflected faintly in a mirror behind a cutting cake. Always there, always watching. Now, when I try to sleep, my mind fills with the soft pop of flash bulbs and the sound of a shutter closing over and over like a door being slammed on something that wants in. Sometimes, half dreaming, I feel a weight on my shoulder. Not heavy, just the light, unmistakable sensation of a hand resting there. Long fingers splayed, claiming. When I jolt awake, the room is empty. The only sound is my own breathing and the faint tick of the cooling radiator. The camera I used that night sits in the corner, turned off, lens cap on. The cracked filter still attached. I've tried to throw it away for times. Every time, something stops me at the door. You don't throw away evidence. A voice in the back of my head whispers. You don't discard the only thing that tells the truth. I've started seeing him without the camera now. In reflections where he shouldn't be. In the glass of shop windows behind strangers. In the black of my TV screen when it's turned off. A tall, pale smudge at the edge of my vision. I don't raise a lens anymore. I don't dare. The last photo I took is still there, burned into my mind if not my hard drive. A faceless figure holding a bride's veil like a trophy, like an invitation, like a promise. I don't think he was claiming her. I think he was showing me how easy it is. I used to think the hardest part of getting married would be writing my vows. Turns out, the hardest part is pretending you don't see the dead woman in the corner of your own reception. My name is Hamza. I'm 32, and 2 weeks ago I married the love of my life while my dead ex-fiancé sat quietly at table 9 and watched. I know how that sounds. If I heard someone else tell the story, I'd assume grief, guilt, maybe unmedicated psychosis. I wish that's all it was. Her name was Aisha. 3 years ago, She died in a car crash on the motorway. Wet road, idiot truck driver cutting lanes, metal folding like paper. They said she died instantly. I never saw her body. Her family wouldn't allow it. Closed casket, quick burial. I set her ring on top of the coffin myself and walked away from a future that had vanished overnight. I didn't date for almost 2 years. When I finally met Hira, it wasn't some fairy tale healing moment. It was awkward and slow, me flinching at every overlap, every similarity. Hira was patient. She never once asked me to forget Aisha, just to move forward with her. By the time we set a wedding date, I thought I'd made some kind of peace with the past. The venue was one of those glass and marble banquet halls just outside the city, all chandeliers and mirrored columns. In daylight, it looked like a showroom. At night, with the outside world turned to black glass, it felt like being inside a jewelry box. Our wedding day was humid, the kind of sticky heat that clings under your collar and turns your shirt into damp cloth. The hall's air conditioning roared, trying to keep up. The air smelled of flowers and freon. Roses, jasmine, and that artificial cold whisper from the vents. The men's room where I got ready smelled like aftershave and hairspray. My groomsmen joked, adjusted their cuffs, took selfies. In the mirror, under the bright, unforgiving lights, my own face looked slightly unfamiliar. Beard trimmed too clean, collar too stiff, dark circles sitting like bruises under my eyes. You look like you're about to testify, not get married. My friend Saad laughed, clapping me on the back. Just tired, I said. Didn't sleep much. I didn't say why. I didn't tell him about the dream I've had on and off for years. Standing at the side of a busy highway at night, knowing a car will crash but never knowing which one until it's already metal and fire. Let's go, groom Saab, the planner called from the doorway. Bride's almost ready. Guests are seated. The main hall hit me with a wall of sound and light. Chandeliers blazed overhead, thousands of crystals catching every glint. The mirrored pillars repeated the scene infinitely. Tables draped in white and gold, floral arrangements rising like small trees, guests turning as I walked in. The air was cool on my face, but my palms were slick. The stage, or dais, was a raised platform covered in white. A couch for me and Hira, 2 ornate chairs for family, a backdrop of flowers dense enough to be a wall. At the far end, the doors were framed by an arch of roses, waiting for her entrance. I walked down the central aisle in a fog of camera flashes and murmurs. People reached out, squeezed my hand, straightened my sleeve. The stage floor felt hollow under my shoes, a slight echo with every step, like there was empty space beneath all that pretty. I sat. Saad and the others flanked the stage. Waiters glided between tables with trays of drinks, their black uniforms merging with shadow. I was half listening to the host murder some rehearsed lines into the mic when I saw her. She was at the back, off to my right, at a table that hadn't been filled yet. Table 9, near a mirrored pillar. At first I registered her as just another late guest. A woman in a pale dress, posture straight, hands folded on the tablecloth. Then my brain caught up with my eyes. The dress was all wrong for the room. Everyone else was in jewel tones, sequins, embroidered fabrics. She wore plain white, not bridal white. No beading, no elaborate dupatta. Just a simple ankle-length dress with lace at the sleeves and hem. I'd seen that dress before. I had watched her try it on in a cramped shop, spinning in front of a mirror, laughing at how old-fashioned and sweet it looked. We'd chosen it for her Mayun 3 years ago. Her hair was down, resting on her shoulders in the soft waves she'd never quite been able to tame. Her face was turned slightly away, but I could see the curve of her jaw, the small mole near her left ear. My mouth went dry. The host's voice faded into a dull buzz. She turned, as if feeling my stare slide over her. It was Aisha, not someone who resembled her, not a woman with similar features. Every detail was correct. The exact slope of her nose, the shape of her lips, even the thin white scar at her hairline from when she'd fallen off her bike at 15. Except her skin. Her skin was wrong. Not rotting, nothing grotesque. Just too pale with a flatness to it, like makeup applied over something that didn't hold warmth anymore. Her lips were colorless. Her eyes, those familiar, deep brown eyes, looked darker, the whites faintly gray, as if she'd been awake for days. When our eyes met, the temperature around me dropped. That's not poetic exaggeration. 1 second, the air was cool but comfortable. The next, it was like someone had opened a door to a refrigerated room. Cold slid under my collar, down my spine, into my bones. She smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. I stood up without realizing it. Saad grabbed my wrist. "Bro, where you going? Hira's about to come in." I just need a second," I said. My voice sounded distant, like it was coming from the speakers across the hall. I stepped off the stage. The chatter in the hall dimmed. People glanced over, curious. The host made a weak joke about the groom being too excited. I walked past him without reacting. Table 9 sat in its pool of candlelight. As I approached, the noise of the hall muffled, as if I'd stepped into a bubble. I couldn't hear the clink of cutlery, the squeal of a child at the next table, just the soft hiss of the air conditioning and my own heartbeat in my ears. Aisha watched me, head slightly tilted. Up close, I could see the faint smear of dirt at the hem of her dress. A fine dust clung to the lace, as if she'd walked barefoot on dry earth. Her feet were bare. No sandals, no henna. Just pale toes peeking out from under the tablecloth, mottled with mud around the nails. I stopped at the edge of the table. My hand hovered over the back of the empty chair opposite her, fingers shaking. "Aisha," I said. Her name felt like a betrayal in my mouth. She leaned forward a little. The candle flame between us stretched toward her, as if drawn, then sputtered, shrinking. "You shouldn't have replaced me," she whispered. Her voice was exactly as I remembered, light, slightly teasing, with that trace of Lahore in the vowels. But there was something else under it now, a dry harshness, like words dragged over gravel. My skin crawled. I swallowed. "You died," I said. "You've been gone 3 years." Her expression didn't change. "You promised me forever," she said. "You promised me I was your only one." Heat rushed to my face, even as the air around us stayed freezing. "I grieved you," I said, my own voice cracking. I'll always." "Then why?" she asked. "Is she sitting on my stage?" I opened my mouth, closed it. My breath puffed visibly in the air between us now, little clouds that vanished as soon as they formed. On stage, someone must have decided they couldn't delay any longer. The music swelled, the entrance song Hira had agonized over for days. Guests turned toward the doors. I glanced back instinctively. The doors opened. Hira appeared in a blaze of red and gold, jeweled from head to toe, light catching on every surface of her like she was made of fire. For a second, everything in me softened at the sight of her. Then I looked at the mirror-paneled column beside the doors. Aisha stood behind her reflection. In the glass, just over Hira's left shoulder, Aisha's white dress glowed faintly. Her hands rested on Hira's shoulders, fingers splayed possessively. Her face, inches from Hira's ear, was turned toward me. In reality, there was no one behind Hira. She walked down the aisle slowly, veil held by her cousins, smiling that nervous, beautiful smile that had made me fall in love with her. As she approached the stage, the cold around table 9 intensified. My teeth started to chatter. I turned back to Aisha. Her eyes were on the stage now. Her fingers tapped soundlessly on the table, 10 slow, rhythmic beats, as if counting down. I did the only thing I could think of. I walked away. I forced myself back up onto that stage, to sit where I was expected, to take Hira's hand when she joined me. Her fingers were warm, soft, the rings slightly cool against my skin. My grip must have been too tight. She winced. "Hey," she whispered, leaning closer. "Are you okay? You look like you're about to faint." "There was someone," I began, then stopped. What was I supposed to say? "My dead ex is sitting at table 9 in the dress we buried her in?" The photographer called our names for pictures. We turned toward the cameras, plastic smiles in place. Flash after flash burst, turning the hall into a stuttering reel of frozen moments. In every reflective surface, mirrors, glass, polished chrome, I caught glimpses of white. Behind us, behind Hira, over my shoulder. Sometimes Aisha stood directly behind the bridal couch in the reflections, hands on the carved wood, head tilted. Sometimes she hovered in the far distance, half lost in glare. Once, in the mirrored platter held by a waiter, I saw her standing right between us, her fingers tangled in Hira's veil. Every time I tried to point, the angle changed, the reflection slipped away. "Stop it!" Saad hissed at me after the third time I flinched mid-photo. "You're freaking people out." Hira's worried. "Can't you see her?" I managed. "Who?" he demanded. "There's no one there, Yar. You need water. Maybe sugar." He pressed a cold glass into my hand. The condensation felt slick and real. The water hit my tongue like nothing, like I was drinking air. The night blurred after that. I went through the motions. Cake cutting, ring shots, awkward speeches. Every time I looked away from Hira, from the living, the hall seemed to tilt toward the dead woman in white. Once, in the big window that looked out onto the parking lot, I saw Aisha's reflection pressed against the glass from the outside, palms flat, dress fluttering in a wind I couldn't feel. When I spun around, the lot was empty, sodium lights buzzing over rows of cars and tarmac. The only time she spoke again was during a staged couple shoot near the end. The photographer had us stand near one of the mirrored columns, Hira's back to my chest, my arms around her. He fussed with her dupatta, arranged the folds of her skirt, stepped back. The hall was clearing out. Only a few guests lingered, their voices distant. "Okay, perfect," he said. "On 3. 1, 2. Do you feel that?" Hira whispered. My arms tightened around her instinctively. "Feel what?" She shivered. "Someone keeps touching my shoulder," she said. "Like cold fingers right here." She raised her hand to her left shoulder, rubbing at the skin through the fabric. "It's weird. Maybe the AC." In the column's reflection, Aisha stood flush behind her, her hands exactly where Hira's had just rubbed. Her head was resting on Hira's shoulder, cheek to cheek. Her eyes were open and fixed on mine. The photographer's flash went off. For a split second, the reflection burned brighter than reality. Then darkness seeped back into the corners. I almost tore the column down. Instead, I smiled for the next shot until my face hurt. We made it through the night without me screaming or collapsing, which I'm pretty sure most of the family now congratulates themselves for. People said things like, "You looked a bit off, but it's nerves, it happens," and "big day, big emotions." No one else saw her. At least no one admits they did. It was the hotel that broke the last piece of denial. We checked into a suite near the airport, generic luxury, all neutral tones and thick carpet. The room smelled faintly of bleach and fabric softener, the way all nice rooms do, plus a hint of something floral from an air freshener. Hira disappeared into the bathroom to scrub off layers of makeup. I sat on the edge of the bed, toes sinking into the soft carpet, staring at my phone without reading anything on the screen. When she came out in a hotel robe, hair damp and clean, our wedding makeup wiped away, she looked more like herself and less like a doll. We lay side by side on the too-big bed, both too wired to sleep. "At least tell me now," she said softly, turning to face me. "What happened back there? You were gone half the time." I opened my mouth. The room lights flickered, just once. A brief dimming, a buzz, then back to full strength. The air conditioning shuddered audibly, like something had passed through its ducts. A smell hit me then, faint, beneath the detergent and hotel fragrance. Damp earth. That specific scent of turned soil after you pour water on it, cool and mineral and wrong for a 7th-floor room. Hira wrinkled her nose. "Do you smell that? Did something leak?" I swung my legs off the bed. The carpet felt cold against my feet now, almost wet. Crouched, pressing my palm to it. Dry. Something dark near the door caught my eye. A set of footprints led from the entrance toward the bed. Not shoe prints, bare feet. Each impression was about the length of Aisha's foot, narrow with a slightly longer second toe, darker than the carpet, as if someone with muddy soles had walked slowly, heel to toe, across the room. The mud was damp, glistening faintly. The air above them was colder. "Hamza!" Hira's voice sounded small. "What is that?" The prince stopped at the side of my bed, right where I'd been sitting before. My throat closed. I followed the line back with my eyes. They started at the door, but not at the crack under it, not at the threshold. The first print was in the middle of the door itself, at about knee height, as if someone had stepped through the wood. I couldn't speak. Hira slid off the bed, clutching her robe around her. She bent to touch one of the prints. Her fingers came away with thin streaks of dark, gritty mud. "This is a joke, right?" she said, voice trembling. "Like some messed up prank?" My mind flashed to the cemetery, to the day we'd buried Aisha, my shoes sinking slightly into the fresh soil at the edge of her grave. The mud had clung to my soles then, dark and sticky. I remembered the pattern the caretaker's bare feet had made where he jumped down into the grave to adjust the coffin. Later, when the police had asked me for anything unusual, I remembered from the burial, I'd told them no. There hadn't been anything unusual then. The unusual part was now. I walked to the wardrobe where our clothes hung, needing to move, needing to do something. When I slid the door open, the smell of damp earth intensified, rushing out like breath. Hira swore under her breath. "Okay, we're changing rooms," she said. "I don't care how crazy they think we are." I stared at the inside of the wardrobe door. Scratched into the polished wood, in long, uneven letters that dug through the varnish, were 4 words. "You shouldn't have replaced. No me at the end." The sentence cut off, as if someone had been interrupted or simply didn't think it needed finishing. My legs nearly went out from under me. We changed rooms. We didn't sleep. The next morning, in daylight, the hotel staff swore there had been no footprints, no damage. The manager's polite smile didn't reach his eyes. He signed our bill with a hand that shook. A week later, I went back to the cemetery alone. It was overcast, the kind of flat gray sky that makes the world feel lower. The graveyard smelled of grass, dust, and stale incense from old offerings. Aisha's grave was where we'd left it. The headstone slightly weathered, the earth settled. But around the edges of the plot, in the soft band of soil where the caretakers walked, I saw them. Barefoot prints, the same size and shape as the ones in the hotel, pressed into the mud, heel to toe, leading away from the grave toward the gate. The caretaker told me they were his, of course. Who else would they be? His feet were bigger than mine, a different shape entirely. He laughed when I asked, then stopped when he saw my face and drifted away, muttering a prayer. That should be the end of the story. It isn't. Sometimes now, when Hira falls asleep beside me, warm and solid and breathing, I lie awake staring at the bedroom door. I listen to the house settle, the fridge hum, the distant sound of traffic. Every so often, I hear a faint, wet slap on the hallway tiles. Another, like bare feet walking slowly toward the door. The handle doesn't turn. The door doesn't open, but the gap under it darkens for a few seconds, as if someone is standing on the other side, waiting. I never get up to check, because I know what she'll say if I open it. "You shouldn't have replaced me." I always thought the creepiest part of weddings was how everyone suddenly acts like they know your future. "My dear, you'll have 3 kids. You'll move abroad. Just wait. You two are going to grow old and die together." People say these things over cake and cheap champagne like they're reading off a script. I smiled through all of it. I didn't start to flinch at predictions until that man raised his glass at midnight. "My name is Rida. I'm 27, newly married on paper, and I'm counting down the days to my first anniversary like it's an execution date." Our wedding was in one of those rustic luxury farm venues on the outskirts, far enough from the city that the sky actually had stars, close enough that Uber still worked. The air smelled like cut grass and wood smoke, and there were fairy lights wrapped around every tree like the place was trying too hard. We chose an outdoor reception because I loved the idea of dancing under the open sky. Big white tent for the food, open lawn for the dance floor, wooden barrels as cocktail tables. Pinterest vomit, basically. It looked beautiful. By 10 p.m., the older relatives had left, The kids had crashed on chairs, and the party had shrunk down to the core. Friends, cousins, a few stubborn aunties, the DJ, and us. The air was getting colder, that damp kind of cold that crawls up from the ground. My dress was heavier than it looked, the sequins and embroidery digging into my collarbone every time I moved. They brought out champagne for the young people toast. Not real champagne, sparkling something, but it caught the light the same way. The glasses felt thin and fragile between my fingers, stems slick with condensation. Zion, my husband, stood behind me with his arm around my waist, chin resting on the top of my head. I could feel his breath in my hair, warm and steady. The fairy lights overhead hummed faintly. Somewhere in the field beyond, a cricket chirped and then went abruptly silent. The DJ turned the music down. Sima, my best friend, tapped her fork against her glass. The sharp, ringing sound cut through the chatter. "Okay," she yelled, a little drunk, a lot emotional. Midnight toast for the couple. People hooped, laughed, shuffled closer to the little circle around us. I felt that soft swell of warmth in my chest that comes when you realize these people actually showed up for you. Their faces glowed amber in the string light haze. Sima went first, of course. Some mix of jokes and sincerity that made me tear up. Then Zion's brother. Then my cousin. Each toast blurred into the next. A collage of "you're perfect together" and "remember when" stories. By the time the glasses had been raised 3 or 4 times, my head was buzzing. Not drunk, just overloaded. Light, sound, sugar, emotion. I checked my phone. 12:03 a.m. "Anyone else?" the DJ called, half teasing. Last chance to embarrass them in public. That's when he spoke up. "I'll say a few words," a voice said from the edge of the circle. It didn't sound drunk or shy, just sure. I turned to see who it was and felt my stomach slip sideways. He stood just beyond the ring of my friends, between 2 of the decorative barrels. Tall, thin, dressed in a dark suit that wasn't quite right for the event. Not fancy enough, like he'd put on the nicest thing he owned and it still didn't match. No tie, white shirt buttoned all the way up. His hair was dark and neat. His face, if you asked me to describe it now, I'd struggle. Not because it was distorted or monstrous, because it was the kind of face your brain refuses to hold on to. Pale, smooth, with features that seemed to shift slightly every time I looked at him, like he never quite settled into focus. He was holding a champagne flute. Sure, man," the DJ said, glancing at Sima as if to ask if this guy was hers. She shook her head slightly. "Friend of the bride or groom?" The man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "You could say both," he replied. His voice was low, clear, with no obvious accent. The kind of voice you'd trust on the phone. Something cold traced down my spine. Nobody challenged him. That's the strange part. A stranger stepped into a tight circle of people who all knew each other and started to talk, and everyone just let him. He lifted his glass, not to the crowd, but toward me and Zion. "To Rida and Zion," he said. He said our names like he'd been saying them his whole life. To futures that unfold exactly the way they're supposed to. A few people chuckled. Someone said, "Here, here. You've made a beautiful promise tonight," he went on. "To be each other's only, to be honest, to be faithful. In sickness and health, in joy and tragedy, through betrayal and forgiveness and everything in between." The word betrayal landed like a stone in the center of the circle. People shifted. The night air felt colder. Sima frowned. "Okay, that's a little. I'm just speaking plainly," he said, eyes still fixed on us. "They deserve that." His gaze pinned me. Up close, I noticed his irises were a strange color, not brown, not hazel. Something flat like old glass. "In 6 months," he told me, "you'll find a message you were never supposed to see. You'll read it 3 times. You'll decide not to ask about it that night." My fingers tightened on the glass. I felt Zion stiffen behind me. "In 8 months," he said, turning his head slightly as if seeing through time. "One of you will say something you can't take back. You'll say it in this exact tone." He mimicked a sarcastic lilt that sounded uncomfortably like mine. "And you'll regret it for the rest of your life. A nervous laugh rippled around us. Someone muttered, "What is this, bro?" "In 12 months, he continued. "On a night just like this, one of you will die." The laughing stopped. The world narrowed to the circle of light around us and the dark, watchful trees beyond. The fairy lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. The air felt thick, like breathing through wet cloth. "You know what?" the DJ said quickly, stepping forward. "I think you've had enough, man. Thanks for—" "Who are you?" Zion cut in. His voice sounded wrong, brittle. "How did you get in here?" The man ignored the DJ. He met Zion's eyes with a kind of gentle pity. "I'm someone who's seen this all before," he said. "Different names, different faces, same patterns. You think you're unique. That's the sweetest part." My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat. My skin prickled, sweat cooling too fast in the night air. "This isn't funny," Sima snapped. "Seriously, who invited you?" He tilted his head. "You did," he said quietly. "You all did, when you decided to promise forever in a place like this. On a night like this, under a sky that's watched this play out more times than you can count." "Security," someone called. One of the venue staff started toward us from the tent, walkie-talkie bouncing at his hip. The man finally broke eye contact with us to glance at his watch. "It's midnight," he said. "We should toast properly. You'll want to remember this." He raised his glass higher. "To your tragedy," he said softly. "To your betrayal. To your anniversary." He smiled then, the kind of smile you give a child before a painful injection. "We'll catch up in a year," he finished. "I'll bring the champagne." My hand moved on its own. I flung the contents of my glass at him, liquid arcing through the cold air. The champagne hit something solid and sprayed back in a fine mist. For 1 second, he flickered. Not disappeared, flickered like a bad video connection. His edges tore into static, the background bleeding through his outline. His face blurred, stretched into something featureless, a white oval for a heartbeat, then snapped back. Gasps turned into shrieks. People stumbled away, bumping into chairs, dropping glasses. The security guard reached him. I watched the man extend his free hand, not in defense, not to strike. Just a small, almost polite gesture, palm up. Then he was gone. No puff of smoke, no flash of light. One blink, he was standing there with his hand out. The next, the space was empty. The champagne he'd been holding shattered on the grass with a tiny, bright sound, as if dropped by invisible fingers. The guard skidded to a halt, eyes wide. "Where did he go?" he demanded, spinning. "Did you see? He was just—" People started talking all at once, laughing hysterically, swearing, insisting it was a trick, that there must be cameras, that someone was punking us. A few older relatives clutched prayer beads and hissed verses under their breath. I stood rooted to the spot, my empty glass shaking in my hand. "Rita," Zion said in my ear, voice low. "Look at me." Couldn't. My eyes were fixed on the patch of ground where the stranger had stood. The grass there was darkened, damp. When the wind shifted, a smell brushed past us. Not champagne, not earth. Burnt sugar. Something sweet that had been left too long over a flame. The rest of the night went on like a car that's technically still moving after it's been hit. Mechanical. Wrong. People muttered about that crazy guy, then forced themselves back into dancing and small talk. The DJ cranked the volume. The staff pretended nothing had happened. We left at 2 in the morning in a car full of wilted flowers and leftover favors. It was only the next day that the venue called us. "Just wanted to follow up about the incident," the manager said carefully. His voice came through tinny on speaker. "We reviewed the gate logs and CCTV. The main entrance was locked at 10, as per contract. No one came in or out after that except a staff member going to the smoking area." "What about the guy with the toast?" I asked. My throat was sore, like I'd been screaming. "That's the thing," he said. "We checked the cameras. Every angle we have of the lawn, the tent, the bar. There's no sign of him. All we see is your guests. No extra person stepping up to speak. No one in a dark suit near you at midnight. Just gaps." What do you mean, gaps? Zion asked. Little patches of static, the manager said slowly, like the feed hiccuped, where you all seem to be reacting to someone who isn't there. I hung up on him. It was the champagne glass that finally broke whatever denial I had left. We were unpacking the last of the wedding stuff at my parents' house. A chaos of ribbons, half-burnt candles, wilting garlands. My mother was sorting through a box of glassware from the venue when she frowned and held one up. "This is nice," she said. "Did someone get it engraved for you?" I took it without thinking. It was the same type of glass we'd used for the midnight toast. Same shape, same thin stem. But this one had something etched into the bowl, faint but precise. I turned it in the light, for words curved along the glass in neat, tiny script. "See you in a year." The Y in year curled down a little too long, exactly like the way his wrist had flicked when he raised his glass. My heart lurched into my throat. My fingers spasmed. For a second, I almost dropped it. "Rita?" my mother asked. "What does it say?" "Nothing," I lied. Just our wedding date." It smudged. I took it up to my old room and shut the door. The air in there smelled like dust and leftover teenage perfume. The glass felt heavier than it should have, cold even after being held. I checked the others. Every single other champagne glass from that box was blank. No engraving, no mark, just that one. We're 10 months out now. Nothing he predicted has technically happened yet. No huge tragedy, no obvious betrayal. But sometimes I catch Zion looking at his phone with a tight expression, and something in me curdles. Sometimes I hear my own voice in an argument and recognize the exact sarcastic tone the stranger mimicked. The glass is in the back of my wardrobe, wrapped in an old scarf. I've tried to throw it away twice. Both times it's turned up somewhere else, on my bedside table, on the kitchen counter, once on the passenger seat of my car when I was sure I'd locked it. The engraving hasn't changed. But a few nights ago, when I couldn't sleep, I took it out and held it up to the light from the street lamp. For a moment, the letters seemed different. The words blurred, stretched, then slid back. "See you in 2 months." When I blinked, it said year again. Plain, neat, final. Our anniversary is in 53 days. People still make harmless predictions around us. Next, a baby. "You two will outlast us all." I nod and smile and refill their glasses. At midnight, sometimes, when the house is quiet and the clock ticks too loudly, I swear I hear cutlery clinking. A quiet hush of voices. A man clearing his throat and raising a glass somewhere just behind me. I haven't turned around yet. I'm scared that if I do, he'll be standing there at my own dining table, suit wrinkle-free, glass full, ready to finish his toast. I used to love choirs. There's something about human voices layered together that always felt safe to me. Warm, holy, bigger than whatever was going wrong in my life. I don't feel that way anymore. My name is Hannah, and my little sister got married in a church filled with the dead. The church itself is older than our parents. Red brick, pointed windows, a steeple with a bell that only rings for weddings and funerals. When we were kids, we used to run our fingers along the grooves in the stone steps and guess how many people had worn them down. Inside, it always smelled like the same things. Old wood, candle wax, dust, and faintly, lilies from funerals long gone. Emma had always said she wanted a classic church wedding. White dress, long aisle, live choir. Like a movie, she kept saying. I was maid of honor and unofficial wedding planner, which meant dealing with the 1,000 tiny problems that pop up when you try to make your life look like a film. The choir had been the one thing that went smoothly. We found them through an agency, Silver Voices Ensemble, a group of 12. I'd listened to their sample tracks online. Harmony so tight they gave me goosebumps, clear Latin pronunciation, the kind of voices that make even non-believers feel something. On the day of the wedding, the church was colder than I expected. It was early November, and the heating in the building hadn't quite caught up to the weather. When I opened the heavy wooden doors that morning, a draft pushed back against me. Cold air tinged with damp stone and polish. My breath fogged faintly as I walked down the aisle in my dress, heels thudding softly on the thin red carpet. We were running late, of course. The florist had been behind, the hair stylist slower than promised. The choir was supposed to arrive at 11:30 for a 1 p.m. ceremony, but when I checked my phone at 11:45, I didn't have any missed calls. No worried texts. Just the last email confirmation from the agency. All set, Hannah. They'll be there. At noon, Father Michael found me pacing in the vestibule. They're here, he said, smiling, hand on my arm. They're already in the loft. I blinked. The choir? When did they get in? He shrugged. I was in my office. I came out when I heard them warming up. Beautiful sound, isn't it? And it was. As we stepped into the main hall, the first notes floated down from the choir loft at the back of the church. Wordless at first, just open vowels rising and falling in slow waves. The sound poured over the pews and wrapped around the rafters. It was perfect, too perfect. Every voice blended exactly. No one sharp, no one flat. No coughs, no little throat-clearing sounds. Just this seamless ribbon of sound. Relief washed through me. One less thing to worry about. The guests began to arrive in bursts of cold air and perfume. The church filled with the rustle of coats, programs, whispered gossip. The organist played something soft while the choir shifted to a low, steady hum. From my spot near the front, I tilted my head back to see them. The loft railing was high, but I could make out shapes. Dark outfits, sheet music held in pale hands, faces turned toward invisible conductors. There were 12 of them, just as promised. 8 in the back row, 4 in front. They stood absolutely still, shoulders squared, mouths opening and closing in perfect unison. Something about that stillness bothered me. Most choirs fidget. Someone scratches a nose, someone shifts their feet, someone looks down to find their place. These 12 stood like statues. Their black clothing blended into the shadows. Only their faces and hands caught the light. When they finished a phrase, their mouths closed together, then opened again on the next note without any of the little breathing gaps I'm used to hearing. Breathe, I mouthed to myself, half joking, turning back around. When the processional started, it chased the thought out of my head. The organ swelled, the choir began Ave Maria, and the doors at the back opened. Emma stepped in, and for a moment, everything in me went soft and blurry. She always hated being the center of attention, but she walked slowly, eyes glossy, bouquet trembling just slightly in her hands. The light from the stained glass painted faint colors on her dress as she passed each window. The choir's voices climbed and fell around her. I watched them as much as I watched her. 12 faces, mouths open, eyes fixed on some point above the altar. And in verse after verse, I noticed the same thing. No one seemed to inhale. Their chests didn't move. Their shoulders didn't rise or fall. Their throats didn't show the slight bob of swallowing. Their mouths closed only between lines, lips sealed for less than half a second before opening again with a full, perfect sound. My own breathing felt loud in my ears suddenly. I realized I'd been matching my breaths to their phrasing, waiting for a gap that never came. I told myself they were just very well trained. The ceremony went smoothly. Bows, readings, rings. The choir shifted seamlessly from Latin hymns to an English piece Emma had chosen, the kind of modern church song that usually makes choirs sound thin. In their voices, it sounded thick, layered, like there were more than 12 of them. At one point, during a quiet interlude, I looked up again. All 12 of them were staring straight at me, not at the priest, not at Emma and Tom, at me in the front pew. Their mouths were still moving, sound still pouring down, but their eyes, every pair, had shifted, like someone had tilted their heads in my direction at the exact same moment. My skin went tight, heat flushed my face, even as my arms prickled with goosebumps. I stared back, heart hammering, waiting for one of them to glance away. None of them did. Not until the last note of the song faded and Father Michael began to speak again. When I looked up next, their heads were bowed, hands clasped neatly around their music. Maybe they were just checking cue from me, I thought weakly. Maybe I was imagining it. After the final blessing, everyone stood, clapping, cheering as Emma and Tom kissed and walked back up the aisle. The choir launched into something bright and joyful, their voices soaring so high I felt them in my teeth. We spilled out into the churchyard in a flurry of confetti and photographs and cold, thin sunlight. People hugged, laughed, smoked, took selfies. I wiped mascara smudges from Emma's cheeks and straightened her veil. "Did you hear them?" she kept saying. "They were amazing." "Yeah," I said, and forced a smile. They really were. Eventually, the guests moved on to their cars, heading to the reception venue. I stayed back to help Father Michael tidy up. The church felt emptier already, the echoes dying slowly. The air inside seemed warmer now, but a damp chill lingered along the floor. "The choir left quickly," he said, stacking programs. "Professional. In and out." "Did you pay them already?" I asked. He frowned. "I assumed you did. Through the agency." I checked my phone. No messages. I realized I hadn't seen any of the choir members up close. Not entering, not leaving. They'd been in the loft when I arrived, and when I wasn't looking, they'd gone. "I didn't see them go," I said slowly. He smiled. "That's good, isn't it? Means they didn't cause trouble." On the way to the reception, stuck in traffic, I finally had a moment to breathe and to make the call I'd been meaning to make all day. I dialed the number for the agency. "Silver Voices Agency, this is Carla." A tired-sounding woman answered. "Hi, this is Hannah Morgan," I said. "I booked the Silver Voices Ensemble for a wedding today at St. Bartholomew's. I just wanted to say they were incredible. Please pass on our thanks." There was a pause on the other end. Papers rustled. "Sorry, did you say today?" Carla asked. "Yes, 1 p.m. church wedding." More rustling, the faint clack of a keyboard. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. Flatter, very careful. "Ms. Morgan, we canceled the booking. I tried calling you last night, but it went to voicemail." My stomach dropped. "Canceled? Why?" "There was an accident," she said. "The bus carrying the ensemble to another event. It crashed on the motorway around 6 p.m. yesterday. They all died. We assumed you'd heard. I emailed again this morning. I thought you'd arrange something else." The car seemed to shrink around me. "That's not possible," I whispered. "They were there. They sang." Father Michael heard them warming up. "The guests." I could hear her breathing now, fast and shallow. "Ms. Morgan, their families are still identifying bodies," she said. "None of our choirs are working this weekend." "Are you sure?" I hung up without replying. The world outside the car window blurred. Trees, road signs, people all streaked into gray. My hands had gone numb around my phone. I told myself there had to be a mistake. A mix-up. Some other choir, some other group. I clung to that for the rest of the night, through speeches and dancing and the moment Emma and Tom left under a tunnel of sparklers. The next day, Father Michael called me. "Funny thing," he said, trying to sound casual and failing. "Our caretaker was reviewing the footage from the cameras. New system, still working out the bugs. Do you want to come by?" The church felt different in daylight after everything. The stained glass looked less magical, more like colored scars. The air was cool, but not as biting. The smell of lilies was stronger. 2 funeral arrangements waited by the side aisle for a service later that afternoon. We met in the little office where the security system was set up. A small monitor showed multiple angles of the church. Nave, entrance, hallway, side door. "Watch," Father Michael said, rewinding. On the screen, timestamps rolled backwards to 11:20 a.m. The nave was empty. At 11:32, the front doors opened and some guests slipped in early. At 11:40, you could see me walking down the aisle, phone to my ear, frown on my face. At 11:50, the audio track picked up something faint. Singing. Soft at first, then stronger. A warm-up scale, precise and clear, notes weaving lightly. It filled the speakers with echoes. But the video showed no one. The choir loft camera angle remained static. Empty rail, empty space, dust motes floating in a beam of light. No figures, no movement, just sound pouring out of nothing. He switched to the camera covering the rear stairwell leading up to the loft. At 11:28, the door at the bottom opened. The image glitched for a second, a smear of static, then steadied. The stairway was empty. The door at the top of the stairs moved slightly, as if nudged from the other side. "That's when I heard them," Father Michael murmured. "I came out of my office right there." He pointed to another feed, smaller in the corner, showing him walking into the nave, looking up toward the loft. Fast forward. The ceremony played out in grainy silence. When the choir sang, the sound was rich and full, but the loft remained visibly empty on the screen. Sometimes the picture would flicker when a particularly loud note rang. Lines tore across the image, then settled. After the pronouncement, people filed out. The choir finished their recessional hymn. Their voices faded. We watched the loft camera. No one left. No one ever appeared. At 1:47 p.m., the door at the bottom of the stairwell closed on its own. The hair on my arms rose. "There's something else," Father Michael said reluctantly. "You left your phone on the front pew at one point. I picked it up for you. It was recording." He handed it to me now. "I forwarded you the file." I opened the voice memos app. There it was, untitled, timestamped 1:06 p.m., during the vows. I hit play. The recording was muffled at first, cloth brushing the microphone, footsteps, then stillness. The choir's song flowed clear and strong. A Latin piece, the words familiar and meaningless. Their harmonies were even more vivid through earbuds, surrounding me, filling my head. I listened, heart pounding, until the last chord rang and faded into silence. Then, very faintly under the lingering echo, I heard it. "Hannah," a voice whispered, not sung, spoken, close to the mic, too close, as if someone had leaned right over the phone. I froze. "Hannah," it said again, more insistent. Threads of other whispers tangled with it, not quite words. Breathless, overlapping. I ripped the earbuds out before I could hear more. "It said my name," I managed. My mouth felt dry. "They said my name." Father Michael swallowed. "You're sure?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. We stopped the recording there. I deleted it in front of him, then emptied the recently deleted folder too. It didn't help. The sound is still lodged somewhere behind my ears, ready to replay when the house is quiet. I don't go to church anymore. I don't listen to choral music either. The first time a Christmas carol came on in a supermarket, my vision swam and I had to leave the cart and walk out into the freezing air with my hands over my ears. Sometimes, late at night, my phone lights up on the nightstand for no reason. No notifications, no calls. Just the screen waking, as if something has brushed across it. Last week, there was a new voice note in my app, timestamped at 1:06 a.m. I hadn't made it. I haven't played it. I know what it will be. I feel it in the way the air in my apartment goes suddenly still sometimes, like a breath being held. The choir that sang at Emma's wedding didn't breathe. I think they're still waiting for me to hit play.